Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling episode of our scary stories. I am your host, a humble navigator through the eerie and the unknown, here to guide you on this macabre journey. Tonight, we leave the safety of our mundane world and step into the shadowy corridors of the supernatural. We'll traverse the cold, stone floors of a haunted wax museum, where figures cast in wax are far from lifeless, where midnight brings a dance of death and a solitary watchman battles to escape his dreadful fate. So, sit back, let the darkness envelop you, and let's step together into the echoing halls of Wraiths of the Waxwork. But remember, dear listeners, once the story begins, there's no turning back. Darkness fell upon the quiet town of Orville like a velvet curtain, heavy with anticipation. The aged cobblestone streets, lit only by dim gaslight, seemed like ancient arteries that pumped life into the heart of the town. The Morose Museum of Wax. Towering over the town square, the museum's Gothic spires scratched at the indigo night. Martin, a man with years etched in the lines of his face and eyes hardened by a past life in law enforcement, felt a chill descend upon him. He stepped onto the hallowed grounds of the museum, his new workplace. The ominous structure loomed before him, casting long and twisted shadows that seemed to dance in the cool night air. The scent of damp earth mixed with the musty tang of aged stone tickled his senses. As Martin pushed open the imposing oak doors of the museum, he entered a world frozen in time. The faint scent of wax, like long extinguished candles, hung in the air. He passed beneath the hauntingly lit chandeliers, their weak light casting a ghostly glow over the life-size wax figures. They stood in silence, forever locked in their final moments, forever watching with painted eyes that held a semblance of lost life. Martin steeled himself as he walked down the corridors of the uncanny exhibition. A breeze drifted through the museum, carrying an unearthly whisper that made his heart pound against his ribcage. Stepping into the grand hall, the night watchman found himself surrounded by the ill-fated figures of history. A Victorian maiden trapped in eternal shock, an accused witch in the throes of her execution, a sunken-eyed sailor frozen mid-drown, each bearing the mark of their ghastly demise, their visages a testament to their suffering. The sailor, captured in his final moment of life, unnerved Martin the most. His lips blue, his clothes soaked, water still seemingly dripping from his drenched coat onto the puddle beneath him. The detail was astounding. His eyes held an alarming depth, a mournful glare that seemed to follow Martin. Drawing a shaky breath, Martin whispered, "Just wax, nothing more." Yet, in the grand hall of eternal night, surrounded by waning moonlight filtering in through the dust-smeared windows, Martin felt the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. His heart thrummed in his chest, his breath echoed in the silence, and the stories of the departed stood frozen in wax, waiting for midnight to strike. As the echoes of the ancient clock tower chimed the witching hour, Martin felt a frisson of terror grip him. Unbeknownst to him, he had just stepped into the cursed rhythm of the waxworks, and his night was only just beginning. As the echoes of the midnight chime faded, a profound silence fell upon the museum. It was a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the meager sounds of the outside world, muffling the distant hoot of an owl and the gentle rustle of the evening breeze. Martin moved with a hesitant step, an unwelcome intruder in the home of the silent watchers. He could feel the chill of the stone floor seeping through his boots, could hear the slight rustling of his uniform against the oppressive stillness. Each wax figure he passed seemed more grotesque, more lifelike under the shivering shadows of the waxen moonlight. His curiosity piqued. He was drawn to the Victorian maiden. Her lifelike eyes were wide with horror, her hands stretched out as though fending off an unseen attacker. It was an eerily vivid snapshot of terror, frozen for all eternity. Continuing his reluctant exploration, he found himself standing before the figure of the accused witch. Her expression was a chilling fusion of defiance and dread, her body poised in a state of frozen frenzy as unseen flames licked at her feet. The air around her felt oddly warm, making the hair on the back of Martin's neck stand on end. Yet it was the drowned sailor that gripped Martin's attention, an unfortunate soul lost to the merciless sea. His eyes held a depth of despair, a call for help that had arrived too late. His wet clothes, the sodden hat, the detail was uncanny. Martin reached out to touch the sailor's cold, waxy face. "Too real," Martin muttered under his breath, shuddering. The chill of the wax under his fingers felt unnervingly like cold, dead skin. Withdrawing his hand, he found his fingers trembling. A sense of dread gnawed at his gut, a silent voice whispering that he was not alone. With a shiver, he forced his attention away from the waxen figures, focusing instead on the archaic architecture and grandeur of the museum. He admired the high arches, the intricate carvings, the cobweb-draped chandeliers, each lending a morbid beauty to the place. With a newfound resolve, he pulled his watchman's log from his pocket. As he began his hourly entry, a feeling of being watched swept over him, a cold prickle at the base of his neck. He glanced around the grand hall once more, locking eyes with the drowned sailor. The sensation was unnerving, a silent whisper in his mind that echoed, "Midnight has come." Yet, the real terror of the night was yet to unfold, lurking in the shadows of the moonlight, waiting for its moment to come alive. In the cold depths of the night, an unseen presence stirred within the museum. The haunting tranquility that had held sway was broken, as an unseen rhythm pulsed through the grand hall. The very air seemed charged with an unnatural energy, a creeping unease that clung to the chilly stone walls and echoed in the distant corners. Martin, ensconced in the watchman's quarters adjacent to the grand hall, felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. A prickle of unease danced along his spine, his heart thrummed in his chest, and the hushed whisper of his intuition told him something was profoundly amiss. Dragging his heavy frame from the moth-eaten armchair, he ventured back into the grand hall. As he stepped into the room, a bizarre spectacle unfolded before him. The room that had been filled with shadows was now bathed in an otherworldly glow, casting the waxen figures in an ethereal light. Frozen in horror, Martin watched as the figures twitched, stiff limbs creaking, lifeless eyes blinking open. A gasp caught in his throat as he witnessed the maiden's fingers twitch, the accused witch's foot shift, the sailor's hand flex. The silence of the room was broken by an eerie chorus of moans and screams as each figure reenacted their gruesome demise. Martin, trapped in the throes of terror, felt his mind reel. His once rational world was shattered by the macabre tableau playing out in the grand hall. With a desperate urgency, he rushed to the museum's doors, but his exit was barred, the once welcoming doors now firm as the cold stone walls. He was trapped in the nightmare unfolding around him. As the spectral pantomime reached a fever pitch, Martin pressed his back against the unyielding doors, feeling the chill of the aged oak seep through his uniform. His eyes, wide with terror, darted from figure to figure, each lost in their horrific dance of death. His gaze returned to the drowned sailor, the figure that had held his attention earlier. As the sailor's blue lips parted in a silent scream, Martin felt the temperature in the room drop, the breath freeze in his lungs. The whispered warnings of impending doom now rang clear. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest, his blood icy in his veins. The watchman realized he was no longer merely an observer. The waxen figures, each a ghastly echo of a life lost, were now his chilling companions in the dance of the dead, a dance that had only just begun. As the terror of the reenactments subsided, the wax figures stilled once again, frozen in their grotesque masquerade of death. The ethereal light faded, replaced by the eerie quietude of the preternatural night. Drenched in cold sweat, Martin made his way back to the watchman's quarters, the distant memory of a comforting, mundane world nipping at his heels. His mind, shaken by the terrifying display, refused to accept the reality of his situation. He sought answers, desperate to restore some semblance of order in his now topsy-turvy existence. Turning to the museum's ancient archives, a dusty room filled with yellowed documents and forgotten lore, Martin dove into the dark history of the Morose Museum. Under the faint glow of a table lamp, he found references to the enigmatic creator of the waxen figures, Argyle Morose, and his infatuation with the macabre. Documents recounted Morose's obsession with creating the most lifelike figures, his restless pursuit for realism culminating in the acquisition of a peculiar wax. Rumored to have been imbued with dark enchantments by an unknown sorcerer, the wax was said to possess the power to trap the spirits of the departed, their turmoil and final moments forever immortalized. Martin's heart raced as he read the chilling tales, each document peeling back a layer of the haunting reality around him. He shuddered at the thought of souls lost and tormented, trapped within their waxen tombs. Yet a glimmer of hope ignited within him, a belief that understanding the curse might provide a means to escape it. Haunted by his discovery, Martin returned to the grand hall, his gaze flitting over the figures with a new sense of empathy. Their silent screams and muted terror now resonated with him, each one a victim of Argyle's twisted obsession. As the clock tower told the passing hour, the whispers of the figures seemed to grow louder in Martin's mind. The curse had awakened, and the watchman had unwillingly become a player in a sinister game. His only hope now lay in understanding the rules, and perhaps finding a way to end the grim spectacle that danced to the toll of midnight. The air within the museum felt heavier with each passing moment, laden with the unspoken stories of the figures, and their macabre theater of death. The heart-wrenching spectacle had left an indelible mark on Martin, compelling him to delve further into the tragic histories ensnared within the waxen figures. Armed with a sense of grim determination, he retreated to the archives once more, immersing himself in the somber narratives of each figure. Each parchment he pored over was a testament to a life lost, a spirit ensnared in the macabre world of Argyle Morose. The Victorian maiden was revealed as Lady Marian, an aristocrat whose life was abruptly ended by an unseen assailant, her shock and terror now forever etched in wax. The accused witch was Agnes, a village healer wrongfully accused during the height of the witch trials, her bravery and defiance against her unjust fate manifest in her eternal pose. Yet it was the tale of the drowned sailor that held Martin's attention. The man had been called Captain Alistair, a seafarer who met his end to the unforgiving sea during a perilous voyage. His eyes, which held such depths of despair, seemed even more haunting now that Martin knew the man behind the figure. As he pieced together the histories, Martin found himself strangely attuned to the figures. Their expressions, which once held nothing more than artistic merit, were now windows into their tormented souls. In the muted light of the grand hall, Martin regarded the figures with a new understanding. He could almost hear the whispers of their past, see the echo of their lives playing out in the ghostly light. Yet the mystery of Argyle Morose and the strange wax remained, a key to a lock he had yet to locate. With the newfound knowledge weighing heavily upon him, Martin resolved to uncover the secrets surrounding Argyle Morose. He clung to the faint glimmer of hope that understanding the curse could hold the key to his escape. As another hour passed, he stood among the waxen figures, each a testament to the grim reality he was now a part of. His resolve had solidified. He would break the waxen curse or become its next victim. The resonance of the clock tower's chime permeated the halls of the museum, marking the passage of another hour. Time seemed to play a dissonant symphony within the walls of the museum, each tick a reminder of the unforgiving reality Martin found himself in. Beneath the waxen gaze of the figures, Martin immersed himself in the tale of Captain Alistair, the drowned sailor. His eyes held an unusual intensity that set him apart from the others. It was a gaze that beckoned Martin, drawing him deeper into the sailor's narrative, a journey that led him to an unexpected connection. Alistair's story unfolded in hushed whispers of ancient lore and forgotten ports. His travels had once led him to an enigmatic sorcerer rumored to possess the power to bind souls. The same sorcerer was said to have enchanted the wax used by Argyle Morose. Buried within the pages of Alistair's chronicles, Martin found references to a confrontation between the captain and Morose. Alistair, horrified by the twisted artists intent to misuse the enchanted wax, had vowed to put an end to Morose's macabre plans. But fate had a cruel sense of irony. Alistair had perished at sea, and his soul had been ensnared by the very curse he had sought to destroy. His deathly tableau now stood as a chilling testament to his failure, and an eternal reminder of Morose's victory. Martin's heart pounded in his chest as he pieced together the tragic narrative. He felt a chill run down his spine as he met the gaze of the drowned sailor. The figure's eyes, once filled with a haunting despair, now burned with a silent plea. A resolve ignited within Martin. He would not meet the same fate as Alistair and the others trapped within their waxen tombs. Guided by the echoes of the past, he vowed to unravel the final pieces of the jigsaw that was Morose's curse. He would challenge the sinister dance of death that played out each midnight and seek a way to break free from its relentless rhythm. The early hours of the morning found Martin consumed by a grim determination. The mystery of Argyle Morose's curse had unfolded like a twisted labyrinth, and now the final path lay before him. As Martin dove further into the ancient tomes, he discovered a forgotten lore surrounding the enchanted wax. The curse that allowed the wax to entrap spirits could only be broken when Morose himself was ensnared within his creation. Only then would the spirits be freed, and the horrific tableau of death cease its grotesque dance. The revelation sent a chill through Martin. To escape, he needed to create a new figure, one of Argyle Morose, forever sealing the artist within his cursed masterpiece. The task was daunting, and the thought of sculpting a wax figure seemed insurmountable. Yet, the alternative was an eternity trapped within the waxy confines of the museum. Fueled by the resolve to escape, Martin gathered the tools he needed. The museum held an untouched store of the enchanted wax, kept away in a forgotten room. Its eerily cool texture under his hands sent shivers down his spine, but he steeled himself for the task ahead. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, as Martin toiled. He felt the specters of the trapped souls watch him, their eternal silence broken by the faint whisperings of hope. His hands, guided by the detailed portraits of Morose, shaped the wax, crafting the eerie likeness of the man who had trapped so many within this ghastly fate. All the while, the dread of the approaching midnight loomed over him. Each toll of the clock tower echoed the grim reminder of his dwindling time, each chime bringing him closer to the chilling spectacle that awaited him in the grand hall. As the waxen figure of Argyle Morose began to take shape, a newfound energy coursed through Martin. With the final piece of the puzzle in place, he was ready to challenge the midnight's morbid walls, armed with hope and the resolve to break free from the waxen curse. As the twilight hour approached, Martin found himself knee-deep in his monstrous task. The chilling figure of Argyle Morose, wrought from the cursed wax, stood as a haunting sentinel in the room. Its eyes, vacant yet eerily familiar, bore into Martin, a testament to his tireless endeavor. His fingers, raw from the relentless carving and molding, traced the contours of the waxen figure one last time. He could feel the pulse of the ancient curse beneath his fingertips, its cool hum resonating with his own heartbeat. A hush fell over the museum as the hands of the clock tower swept towards midnight. Each tick of the clock resonated through the silent halls, a grim countdown that echoed in the confines of Martin's mind. Suddenly, the figures began to stir. Their initial twitching grew into a grotesque pantomime of their final moments. The eerie tableau from past nights began to play out once more, the grand hall a theater for the waxen dance of death. But this night was different. Tonight, Martin stood amidst the terrifying spectacle, not as a prisoner, but a challenger. With the figure of Argyle Morose by his side, he prepared to confront the curse that had claimed so many souls. The air around him grew heavy, charged with an otherworldly energy. The waxen figures, trapped in their eternally damned spectacle, seemed to sense the impending confrontation. The spectral pantomime reached a fever pitch, their cries a crescendo in the chilling symphony of the cursed museum. As the climax approached, Martin could feel his heartbeat quicken, could hear the blood rush in his ears. The figures around him swirled in a dance of despair and death, but his gaze remained fixed on the waxen figure of Argyle Morose. The echoes of the past, the whispers of trapped souls, were all converging on this single moment, the final midnight of the waxen curse. The hushed anticipation of the museum broke with the tolling of the midnight hour. The sound reverberated off the ancient stone walls, an ominous melody that wove itself into the fabric of the terrifying spectacle. With a determined step, Martin placed the wax figure of Argyle Morose amidst the ghastly tableau. As he did, an unseen force seemed to sweep through the grand hall. The air grew colder, a bone-chilling cold that prickled his skin and frosted his breath. Before his wide eyes, the figure of Argyle Morose began to twitch. The stiff, waxen limbs creaked as they moved, mimicking the unsettling dance of the other figures. Martin felt his heartbeat sync with the cadence of the spectacle, a grim percussion that underscored the horror unfolding around him. With each passing moment, the figures' dance grew more frantic, their silent screams more desperate. The waxen figure of Argyle Morose joined their ranks, a puppet to the same cruel fate he had once orchestrated. Then it happened. Argyle Morose's figure stilled. The other figures followed suit, their dreadful dance pausing as if the strings of their morbid puppeteer had been cut. The air in the grand hall seemed to quiver, the heavy silence bearing down on Martin. Then, in a terrifying flourish, the wax figure of Morose enacted its creator's own end. The figure contorted in unspeakable agony, the phantom pain mirrored in each of the other frozen figures. The air rippled with their shared torment, a final testament to their suffering. Suddenly, a blinding light engulfed the grand hall. Martin shielded his eyes, the brilliant radiance casting long, dancing shadows around the room. As quickly as it appeared, the light receded, leaving the grand hall bathed in the calm glow of the moonlight. Martin slowly opened his eyes. Where once the figures had stood, now only lifeless wax remained. Their eerie lifelike quality was gone, leaving behind mere sculptures devoid of the spirits that had once animated them. With the breaking of the curse, a heavy sigh seemed to pass through the museum, a sigh of relief from countless souls finally freed. Martin slumped to the floor, a rush of relief flooding his senses. He had broken the curse. The grim dance of the Waxwork Wraiths had finally met its end. In the hushed silence of the pre-dawn hours, Martin found himself standing alone amidst the lifeless wax figures. The spectral dance of death had ceased, leaving behind a chilling memory etched deep within the walls of the museum and the recesses of his mind. Exhausted, Martin gathered his strength and approached the museum's entrance. His fingers wrapped around the brass door handle, now cold and benign, void of the malevolent force that had once held him captive. With a gentle push, the door creaked open, revealing the first glimmers of dawn creeping over the horizon. Stepping out into the cool morning air, he left the museum behind. It was no longer the prison of tormented souls, but a mere structure of stone and wax. His footsteps echoed in the cobblestone streets, a reminder of his escape from the nightmarish grip of the Waxwork Wraiths. The once foreboding structure now stood silent and lifeless in the morning light. The once horrifying figures that it housed were nothing more than inanimate objects, lifeless tokens of a dark history that had been laid to rest. Yet, even as he turned his back on the museum, Martin knew a part of him would forever remain within its walls. He carried with him the chilling memories, the echoes of the trapped souls, the grueling dance of death that he had been a part of. As he walked away, the first rays of the sun spilled over Orville, painting the sleepy town in hues of gold and orange. The night's horrors had passed, giving way to a new day. Martin's ordeal was over, his freedom reclaimed, but the scars of the night would forever mark his soul. As he disappeared into the dawning day, the Morose Museum of Wax stood in solemn silence. It was no longer a stage for the macabre dance of the dead, but a monument of a curse broken and souls freed. Its doors stood open, revealing nothing but hollow echoes and the lingering scent of cold wax. Though the night was filled with terror, dawn brought respite. The toll of midnight had rung its final chime, the wraiths of the waxwork forever silenced. And so, dear listeners, we've come to the end of our chilling tale. As dawn breaks, we find respite from the haunting dance of the Waxwork Wraiths, leaving behind the hallowed halls of the cursed museum. Yet, the echoes of our journey persist, don't they? Lingering like the scent of cold wax, the memories of the silenced spirits. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the grand halls of the Morose Museum. Be sure to join us next time as we delve into another story where the ordinary gives way to the horrific and the veil between reality and nightmare thins. Until then, keep the lights on and remember, the darkest stories lurk within the shadows of the known. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.